We've given the 2023 Mariners their report cards for the season, but now it's time to hand them some awards. We'll crown Seattle's team MVP, Cy Young, and a whole lot more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
Let's go, baby.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Halloween, sailors. It is Tuesday, October 31st, 2023. This is Coach Lasso and Coach Beard for the Locked On Mariners Season Awards Spooktacular. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. So today we'll be handing out 6 awards to the 2023 Seattle Mariners. Go MVP, Cy Young, Reliever of the Year, Platinum Glove, Most Improved, and Unsung Hero. And we're going to start in reverse order. So first up, Unsung Hero. We're going to save the best for last. It's Colby. Who's your unsung hero for the 2023 Seattle Mariners?
Yeah, not a ton of options, I guess I should say. A lot of disappointments this year, more so than, surprises. But, there are a few that stand out here. Jose Caballero certainly jumps out. Mike Ford for what he was able to do for the lineup for, a couple months and even a little bit after he cooled off. Those are a couple guys, probably the two main contenders. I do also think that Josh Rojas deserves some love in this category. Really stabilized second base after, the disaster that was Colton Wong. So, there's a few options, not a ton. Isaiah Campbell's another guy I'd throw into the discussion, but I think if I had to pick somebody, I would probably pick, I think Jose Caballero over Mike Ford, but it's pretty close. Cabby, came up and he pretty much single-handedly prevented you from having like the worst second base production in the history of baseball for a couple weeks. I think Cabby's probably the unsung hero. And then I think, Ford is probably second, but I also want to, give a shout out to Josh Rojas and Isaiah Campbell.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to be in agreement on this one. I'm also going with Jose Caballero. I mean, you got 2.2 F4 out of the guy that you got in the Mike Leake trade, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? It had been a while. Cabby was really fun to watch if you're a Mariners fan. If you're not a Mariners fan, you probably hate Jose Caballero. He was one of the most annoying players in baseball in terms of calling time at the most inopportune moments at the plate. I think about Lucas Giolito when the White Sox were visiting and how visibly annoyed he looked with Caballero. I also think about Cabby, talking smack to Martin Maldonado behind the plate. Dude is a lot of fun. He's got some fire in him, and it's really cool to have someone like that on the team. Also on top of that, I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, he stabilized arguably your worst position on the team for a little while. Obviously fell off towards the end there, and he wasn't being used nearly as much towards the end of the season. But overall, I mean, this was a roaring success for Jose Caballero. You were expecting literally nothing out of this guy. He also was second on the team in stolen bases. He walked quite a bit. He was getting hit by pitches. He was able to get on base and do some damage on the base pass. I mean, he also made some pretty big errors on the base pass, but we'll ignore that for now. But yeah, overall, really, really good season from Caballero. And I mean, he's one of those guys where you're going to look back at the F4 leaderboards and go, how is that guy worth 2 wins this year? But I mean, when you think back on what he really meant to the Mariners this season, I mean, again, considering what he was able to give you at second base, and obviously that's the lowest of low bars to clear in terms of improving at that position. But the Mariners really needed Jose Caballero at the moment that he came up, and the production that he was able to give you, especially in that first month that he was up with the team. I mean, you couldn't have asked for anything more perfect than that, really. So yeah. The next award here, I think we're also going to be in agreement on, and I think this one's pretty obvious, but you say it. Who's the most improved player on the 2023 Seattle Mariners, Colby?
Dylan Moore.
Yeah.
Yes, and you think I hate Dylan Moore. I
Right.
think the only answer really is JP Crawford. This is a guy who went from a slap hitting shortstop to putting up league average WRC pluses to being probably the second best offensive shortstop in baseball this year, at least in the American League. Looking like he can hit 20 home runs and maintaining his high walk rate and is on base. He led the American League in walks. Solid defender at shortstop still. Like, yeah, JP Crawford took huge steps forward. He was 30 some odd percent better this year than he was last year. You're not going to find improvement like that very often. And what's nice about all that is that it seems like it's somewhat repeatable. I mean, maybe not the 134 WRC plus or 138, whatever it was,
Yeah.
WRC plus, but like, do we have really any reason to believe that JP Crawford can't hit 12 to 15 homers next year? Can't, be a 4-win player? Can't put up a 120 WRC plus next year? I don't think so. So, it's nice when most improved is actually an improvement instead of just like this guy had a hot season, right? Like
Yeah,
this
like
guy.
he didn't fluke his way into it. He put the work in. Like he
Mhm.
changed his offensive profile. He added bat speed and that led to, more home runs. Like he put up 19 home runs this season, which is no one could have expected that out of JP Crawford this season. So, not just the WRC plus improvements and not just like the insanely high walk rate, it's also he had power output and consistent power output. Like that is really, really special coming from a guy that, his career high in home runs in a season was 9 before this year. That's insane. That's an insane jump. And look, I know that like in his profile when he was a prospect, he was projected to be more, 12 to 15 home run power, but we never really saw that. That didn't really translate to the big league level until this year. So the fact that he was able to do that, that he was able to tap into more power and just build off of a really great foundation that he already had, which was great discipline, elite plate discipline. Like he became a legitimate star this year. All right, so we're going to be going over the best defender and the best reliever on the 2023 Seattle Mariners in just a moment. But first, a reminder this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and a whole lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKDON, and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So let's get back into these awards here, Colby. The best defender on the 2023 Seattle Mariners is or was?
Couple options here. Dom Canzone is not one of them. So really, it feels like it's a 2-horse race. I guess you could throw Cal in there if you want to, but I think we're probably gonna go with Gino on this one.
Oh,
Yeah, it's close between him and Julio, but Gino just I don't know. I feel like Gino made more spectacular plays, I guess we'll call it. Like Julio certainly made his fair share, but I just feel like Gino was a little more consistent. I feel like his best plays, his top 10 plays are a little bit better than Julio's top 10 plays. Definitely he got snubbed from the Gold Glove. He was pretty much inarguably the second, or at least the second best defensive third baseman in all of baseball. So I think I'm going to go with Eugenio, with Julio in a close second, and then Cal Raleigh probably third.
all right. Well, I'm going Julio. I'm going Julio here. 97th percentile and outs above average in center field. It's a real testament to the work that he's put in to play that position and play that position at a very high level. And not only did he have a couple of, Heisman moments like in Baltimore or the Fernando Tatis robbery, but he also made a lot of really difficult plays look routine. like tracking balls in the gap without even having to leave his feet. Like he had a ridiculous year in center field. And I think he's more than deserving of not just this award on this show, which means nothing, but also the Gold Glove, which, as we also
Also
know,
means
really
nothing.
means nothing. Yeah, it really means nothing at the end of the day. But it would be cool for him, a cool accomplishment for him, and I think he's more than deserving. And obviously, you know our feelings on Gino getting snubbed over at third base. I don't think that's a wrong answer there either. Really, I heavily considered Gino, and I also considered Cal quite a bit because he had a ridiculous second half of the season, specifically in those final 6 weeks of the year. But I think Julio just across the board was more consistent than Cal, and but it's really close between him and Gino. But I'm gonna give the slight edge to Julio on that front. All right, best reliever of the year for the 2023 Seattle Mariners, Colby.
Matt Brash.
Yeah, yeah,
Next question.
it's unequivocally Matthew Brash.
It's unfortunate because you feel like you want this award to be like, a lot of guys had a shot at this because you want your bullpen to be deep and all that stuff, but no, Brash was significantly better than Munoz, and obviously Munoz's struggle and the last couple, 6 weeks or so really doesn't help his cause here. He was also hurt.
Yeah,
And it just there's nobody else to give it to. Like Topa had a really nice year, and Spire
yeah,
had a really nice year, and Campbell had a really nice year. Not even close to what Brash did. So this one is a
yeah.
layup. Like there's really no debate to be had here. It's Matt Brash, and then everybody else, pretty easily.
Yeah, he was the fourth most valuable reliever in all of baseball by F4. He was one of, I think, 5 or 4 relievers in all of baseball to eclipse 2 F4. I don't know if he was that good. Like, he was really good this year. I don't know if he was that good. Like, Fangraphs really loves strikeouts. Really, really loves strikeouts. And Brash struck out a lot of dudes, but he also, ran a 3.69 walk rate. And we talked about this during our report card series when we were talking about the bullpen. Like, there were times where it was just like, all right, I don't really trust Matt in the situation. Like, like after the first couple of pitches, like what kind of Matt Brash you're going to get. But overall, yeah, I mean, for his first full season out of the bullpen, pretty great stuff. I mean, he at most of the time looked like the guy that we expected him to be in the preseason when we were talking so very highly of him. I gotta be real. I did kind of consider Paul Sewald here, but that felt like cheating because I was going to include the fact that he, went to the Diamondbacks, dominated, went to the World Series. He's a big reason why they're in the
It's
World
not
Series.
cheating.
Like,
That's trolling.
right, sure, right, yeah, it's probably just
That's
mean
just that's just Ty's excuse to rehash the trade deadline again,
to
which, as a
relitigate the deadline.
reminder, was
Right,
awful. Not because
right,
of the Paul Sewald trade, but because of
right,
nothing else after that.
right, right. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here as we hand out season awards to the 2023 Seattle Mariners, and we're now in the meat and potatoes of our awards show here. Cy Young, Colby, there's a few options here. I think there's one fairly obvious option, but I'm interested to see what your take on this is.
Paul Sewald.
So mean.
Yeah, I think there's 3 options. I mean, really.
Mhm.
I guess technically you could throw Brash in the mix, although I don't like it when relievers, are in the mix for like the actual Cy Young. That just feels cheap because they have to be really good for like 60 innings, and most starting pitchers in the Cy Young discussion are just as good as those guys for like 120 innings. And then, they're good to find for the other 60 to 70 innings. So I guess Brash is probably like the 4th, but it's Castillo, Gilbert, or Kirby to me.
Mhm.
I do feel like numbers wise, Kirby and Castillo were just better than Logan Gilbert. So it's really, to me, it's between those 2 guys, and maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but I'm going to give it to George over Luis, just because the numbers are they're pretty close, and I can't get those last 2 starts that Luis Castillo gave Seattle out of my head. Whereas George went out there and was very good in his last 2
Yeah.
starts. It just, like I said, it could be recency bias. Castillo had a great year. It's not a shot at him, but
Mhm.
he did, fumble the ball when the Mariners needed him the most, and George did the opposite. So
Right.
I think that's weighing pretty heavily here. And when the contest is as close as it is, for me at least, those type of things really do come into consideration. So for me, it's George 1A, and I think Luis is 1B. And then I would say Gilbert's probably a clear number 2 or 3 in this case.
It actually came down between Kirby and Logan for me,
You're
because
an idiot.
I feel like Logan was arguably your most consistent pitcher over the course of the full season, but it's impossible to ignore how impressive George Kirby's season was this year. I mean, an 0.90 walk rate. Are you serious? That's insane. Like that's literally insane. I remember we did our over unders before the season. I said it like a 1.5 walk rate, which like that is insane. Still, an o- an 0.90 walk rate over 190 and 2/3 innings pitch. That's not like
Pretty good.
ridiculous stuff. Yeah, yeah, ridiculous. Would like to see his stuff take a little bit more of a step forward. But overall, I mean, just a
Sorry, did you not
fantastic
see the
season.
knuckleball?
Well, that's true. That's true. Are we real quick? I think I asked you this on the Patreon a while back, but I'll ask you this here. Do we think that's actually going to be a thing?
No,
No, I want it to be a
no.
thing, though. I want it to be a thing.
It was
So bad.
really good. It was
It
really
was a
good.
really good knuckleball.
Maybe they like mix it in, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like if there's one thing that Kirby really doesn't have, the splitter's not quite there yet. The changeup he hasn't really gotten a good feel for. He kind of needs a off speed pitch that's not a breaking ball. And obviously the other pitches need to get sharper too. But no, I don't think we're gonna see that. Like I don't think like he's gonna throw 10 of those an outing or whatever. Like maybe one every couple starts, but like no, I don't see that being like a regular pitch because it's really hard to control, and even for George Kirby, who's the master of command. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't see it, but if he wants to mix it in every once in a while, fine. It was really good the one time he threw it in a game. So like
Yeah.
136 RPMs. And he got Corey Seager to whip on it. So it's good. It's just a matter of like, can you be consistent with it? And I don't know if George wants to test. I would say this. I hope he doesn't spend a lot of time on the knuckleball this offseason. Like
Sure.
let's sharpen up the slider a little bit. Let's, get some more break on the curve and let's really
Yeah. Let's
dive
get
into
some
that
more.
splitter.
Let's get some more swing and miss. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Because he's got to be able to counter the over aggressive approaches from opposing offenses, which got him at times, and sometimes he was able to take advantage of that. But I would like to see him be
Mhm.
able to take advantage of that with more consistency. But yeah, overall, I mean, in terms of like first full season in the bigs, and you post again, I'm going to reemphasize this because it is insanely impressive. An 0.90 walk rate and almost 200 innings pitch. Like you're out of your mind. Like that's wild. All right. The big reward, MVP, most valuable player. The most valuable player on the 2023 Seattle Mariners was
Well, Ty's going to say John Stanton, so let's just get that out of the way. You can
wow.
roast him for that in the comments.
Wow. Oh no.
So MVP, again, to me, this feels like a 2-horse race. I
Mm,
think it's, pretty obviously it's either Julio or it's JP.
yep.
So it's interesting. Julio definitely has the numbers advantage here over JP. Uh, but JP has, I guess we'll call it like the narrative advantage because, when the moment was the brightest, who did you want up at the plate? Did you want JP or did you want Julio? You wanted JP. There's really no
Mm,
debate about that. JP was better with the bases loaded. He was more consistent all year long.
mm,
And he's a 5-win player. I know Julio's a 6-win player, but JP was a 5-win player by himself. And you have to factor in leadership, you have to factor in consistency, you have to factor in, how was this guy in the big moments? And whereas Julio, at times seemed to shrink in these big moments, JP did the opposite. He rose to the occasion more times than we can remember. So it's tough, man. I think just the sheer numbers alone probably make Julio's case a little bit stronger than JP's because JP's again it's a lot of narrative. Not that the numbers weren't really good. You also
Mhm.
factor in Julio's glove and you factor in his defense. Like Julio definitely had a better year, but as in terms of like who's more valuable to the Mariners in 2023, JP had a lot of big hits and JP was in the middle of a lot of big moments. And Julio, not so much. Julio was really good. Like he was on another planet in the month of August, but the rest of the year, he was pretty good in
Yeah.
July. He just wasn't consistent. JP was very consistent day in, day out. So it's tough. I feel like we should split the award, but if I have to pick somebody, I'm probably going to lean Julio, but I could really go either way on this. It's a true toss up.
I'm gonna go JP. I'm gonna go
Sure.
JP because Julio, like offensively, if we're just looking numbers against numbers, Julio's offensive numbers are heavily carried by that month of August, which was insane. But outside of that month of August, we talked
Still
about this
counts.
during the report cards. Like, yeah, it still counts. Like, don't get me wrong. But like outside of the month of August, and we talked about this during the report cards, like he was slightly above league average as a
It was
hitter,
okay.
which is not what you need out of Julio Rodriguez. Like overall, that's a good player still, especially when you factor in the defense and the value on the base
Mhm.
pass, all that. But it's not what like Julio Rodriguez, the face of your franchise,
No,
needs to
but
be. Yeah.
Julio's defense and base running never slumped. Those were
Right.
plus the entire year.
Right. And
So he
look,
was.
Julio has a very clear advantage defensively over JP.
Mhm.
Very clear advantage over him in terms of stolen bases. JP is a very good base runner,
Yep.
but
Cuts the
stolen,
bases incredibly well.
yeah, amazing. And when the helmet flies off, like
You're like,
you,
oh,
you,
he's safe.
he-
We
he's
know
scoring,
he's safe.
he's scoring,
Yep.
he's scoring.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely. But JP established himself as the captain of this team.
Yep.
He was more consistent, like you said.
Mhm.
Obviously, I can't imagine where the 2023 Mariners would be without Julio, but I also really can't imagine where the 2023 Mariners would be without JP. Like JP to me is the heart and soul of this team. Again, if you ask Jerry Dipoto, Scott Service, etc., like who do you think is the epitome of your culture and of your philosophy? It's JP Crawford. So I'm going to give him the MVP here because he was just more consistent than Julio, offensively speaking, and I don't think that the gap between him and Julio, defensively speaking and stolen bases wise, um, is enough for me to give it to Julio over JP for how consistent JP was this year, offensively, just across the board, and for how much he showed up at the end. And I get like that's narrative driven and all that, but JP produced in the month of September. JP produced when the Mariners needed him the most. Whereas
Yep.
Julio really didn't, especially over those last few weeks in the season. And so that really, at the end of the day, gives him the edge for me in the MVP race, or in the MVP conversation here for the team.
Yeah, I think it's close. I think that any conversation here would have to be closer to like a 1A, 1B type of situation than like
Yeah,
clearly it was this guy versus the other guy.
right.
Just
There's no,
for
I don't think there's a wrong answer here between those two guys. Like I'll just say that. Like,
no. Yeah, I think the overall numbers are just so overwhelmingly in Julio's favor that it's tough to
right.
overlook that. And Julio's probably going to win a Silver Slugger. He's probably going to win a Gold Glove. JP has no shot at Gold Glove. Uh, he had a shot at the Silver Slugger if Corey Seager hadn't played out of his mind for
Yeah, if Corey
110
Seager didn't
games,
exist, then yeah,
or if he was in the
JP.
National League. Like
Yeah,
like the difference between JP Crawford and the third best shortstop offensively this year in the AL pretty significant.
right,
But unfortunately, so too is the difference between Corey Seager and JP. So
right.
JP is going to walk away without any hardware this year, which is a bummer. Not even an All Star game appearance, but it was an
Yeah,
incredible year. And just throughout this poll, as we were talking, it's got 38 votes so far. JP
mhm,
heavily favored by the Twitter community,
mhm.
82% saying that JP was the
Wow.
MVP. That number should be closer to 50-50, but I get it. I totally get it. JP is like
Right.
the guy we stand right now. And I also do think that people like he spoke his mind about the ownership and all that stuff. And people are
Yeah.
heavily on Team Cal, Team Ty, and Team JP because of that. And Julio really didn't weigh in on that, which he doesn't have to. It's he doesn't need to either. But
Yeah.
JP certainly can, and he carries that kind of weight in that clubhouse. So JP is an incredibly important player.
Yeah.
It's we last offseason we're like, would you consider trading JP? Like, are you moving JP to second? And
Yeah.
this year it's like, nope, he's my guy.
He's
Like
part
we're
of the core.
building,
Yeah,
he's in the
I'm
core.
going
Yeah.
to war with that man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird that in just a year he's gone from like being like a an ancillary piece, support player to being in the core of your build. So yeah, great season for him. We do have a little time left. The Mariners did make some roster moves today. You want to talk
Yeah.
about that real fast?
Yeah, I was actually trying to hurry up things with the awards so we would have time to talk about that. So
Well, it's not
I'm
a lot
glad
to
that you
go over,
mentioned it.
but
Yeah, it's not a lot, but we've talked in the past about the 40-man um crunch. It's not really a 40-man crunch, but they obviously they were over 40 or they're going to be over 40
right,
players once the Series ends because of all the guys that have to
46, I
come off of
believe.
the because of all the guys that have to come off of the 60-day IL. Penn Murphy is one of those guys. He was DFA'd in secret. We found out via his Instagram that
Sure,
he has been claimed off of waivers by the Mets. The Mariners have now officially announced that, as well as Easton McGee being DFA'd and outrighted to AAA Tacoma, Adam Aller being DFA'd and outrighted to AAA Tacoma, and Luis Torrens, who was eligible for arbitration and was projected to make 1.2 million, I believe,
yeah.
in arbitration. He's been DFA'd and outrighted to AAA Tacoma as well. So those guys clear. I believe they can still elect free agency.
They can opt. Yep, they can opt
Yeah,
into free agency. That's their choice.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, Penn Murphy's kind of the one that is surprising a lot of people. You wouldn't be surprised if you listen to our show because we've pegged this for the last week or so that Penn Murphy
yeah.
is highly likely to get non-tendered and or DFA'd, I should say. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
next up in a name that's probably going to surprise some people until they really think about it, Evan White.
Evan
Uh,
White, yeah.
he's going to get DFA'd and he will not be claimed and he will report to AAA. So he will remain in the organization, unlike Penn Murphy.
Because no
So
one's going to pay him $7
right,
million.
right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you'd listened to the show, we would have warned you about Penn Murphy. Do we do that here or on CTZ? Either way,
I think we did it on a mailbag. Yeah, I think we
okay,
got
yeah.
asked
So
by the Darren McCacken enjoyer.
yeah,
Asked about
so
the 40-man stuff.
yep, they still have a couple more spots to go. I think they were at 46 and they only had 3 free agents coming off, so they might be at 39 now. But obviously Emerson Hancock is going to get re-added, Marco's going to get re-added, so I think they have to make 2 more moves just to get to 40.
Robbie Ray is
And
going to be re-added.
right, and one of those moves will be, I think, Evan White, and then it's Ryan Jensen, Ryder Ryan. The Mariners don't really have a 40-man crunch, and the Murphy
Cooper
thing's
Hummel,
not surprising.
all that.
He's not going to pitch this in 2024, and he's 29 years old. Like
Yeah.
we
I'm
wish
just surprised. I'm just surprised that the Mets took a chance on him.
right. I don't be surprised if he gets GFA'd again. Like because
Yeah, he
is
might be
not,
one of those guys who just
Yep,
like bounces around from team
mhm.
to team to team to team. Like David Rollins was
Yep.
one of those guys
Mhm.
a few years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked at all if Penn ends up back with the Mariners at some point. It's just you're not going to carry a guy on the 40-man who's not going to pitch in for all of 2024 because he had the UCL surgery in July.
Yep.
So he's done. Easton McGee, same thing. He wasn't gonna pitch this next year either. He had a shoulder thing. So, and then Torrens, they weren't gonna pay 1.2 million bucks for him.
Actually, I think didn't McGee also have Tommy John?
It might have been Tommy John, but either way,
Yeah.
he's not gonna pitch more than likely
Yeah.
this year. And I mean, you're not gonna carry a guy who might give you 10 innings of replacement level ball on your 40-man all winter. So no real surprises, if you were paying attention. So yeah, it's that time of year, man. Guys are gonna start getting released and all that, and guys are going to start getting non-tendered here pretty soon. The off season starts, I mean, technically the day after the World Series, but uh, you know, non-tenders 5 days after, opt-outs are mostly 5 days after. Like we're coming
Mhm.
up on it now, so in depending on how long the World Series goes, sometime next week we will officially be in the off season. So it's exciting if you're not Texas or Arizona. But yeah, we're going to start seeing more stuff like this. Don't be surprised if you see a few other teams. The Mariners already claimed like Caleb Orr, for example. So
Yeah.
It's that time of year where this stuff kind of just gets dropped on you. But it's going to happen across baseball more and more over the next few days.
That's the good old roster crunch of
Mhm.
November and December. So
Yep.
a lot of guys are going to be coming in and out of Seattle and a lot of other places as well over the next few months. All right. So Colby, do you have a question of the day for the comment section?
How would you best describe Stairway to Heaven?
Good one. Good one. Yeah. All right. Let us know. Let us know in the comments.
What's the perfect number of days to spend in Vegas?
3. I spent 3 days in Vegas, and that was enough for me.
2 is perfect. 3 is too much.
So that's gonna that's gonna do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners Season Awards Spooktacular. Coach Beard, I'm Coach Lasso. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez, the CANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a spooky Halloween, and we'll see you next time. Barbecue sauce.